This is a recording of a radio show broadcast on the University of Michigan's internal system.
I got some great jokes, man.
Some great jokes? Like what?
Why do black people smell?
Why?
So blind people can hate them too.
This is a fake hunting license slipped under the door at a campus meeting. It proclaims open season on jungle bunnies and saucer lips, states that only 5 a day should be killed. These anti-apartheid shanties have been repeatedly daubed with racist slogans. In a country where the strife of the civil rights years is still a relatively recent memory, such incidents are not taken lightly. In Michigan's Ann Arbor campus, there's real fear and anxiety.
It manifests itself in a lot of different ways, from being the only minority in a class of 500 students, or, you know, having people look at you funny. When we congregate, you know, people look at us funny, or just little snide remarks.
There's just no communication at all, and for good reason. I mean, it's a pretty scary place to be.
When you said scary, what do you mean?
Well, if I was black, it's a really white place. I really don't think that it's anything major. I think a lot of the black people aren't really worried about it either.
Black power! That's real power! Black power! That's real power!
Black students have responded by reforming the Black Action Movement, the body that led a student strike here in 1970. They've held rallies, demanded action from the university administration. And for some, the lessons of the civil rights movement are being learnt again.
When we're starting to reflect on change that occurred in the past, we realize that it's always a struggle. We've always had to fight to make gains, and I think this is just something that we know we have to do, especially being black. I know that if I'm going to have any type of change, it's going to be a struggle, and it's just a part of my history.
The University of Michigan has a high academic reputation. It's sometimes called the Harvard of the Midwest. But above all, it prides itself on a long liberal tradition, and on the way the university responded to the civil rights movement 20 years ago. That racial animosity should erupt here, of all places, has focused attention on events on other campuses across America, and indeed on what's happening in American society as a whole. At Columbia University in New York, an incident between a white student and a black student turned into what blacks describe as a small race riot. At the Citadel in South Carolina, white students dressed as Ku Klux Klansmen invaded a black student's room and burnt a paper cross there. And there have been other incidents at Amherst, Austin, and Wellesley.
My notion of youth, and of educated youth in particular, was that they would indeed signal the advent of a new era in terms of issues of race.
To some, they are isolated incidents. To others, part of a pattern that can't be dismissed as student pranks.
I think some of the problems we're having on this campus are part of a larger national pattern. And indeed, if one looks at the evidence, you see the pieces of the puzzle fitting together. I think that there has been, across the board, a resurgence of racial tensions, racism, and the associated problems.
Attempts to understand campus racism have led university authorities to look at what's happening at a lower level in America's public schools.
Just the sensory details.
In the early 1970s, attempts to increase the number of black high school children going on to college met with some success. In Michigan, minority enrollment reached 10% in 1976. But here and across the nation, fewer and fewer black students are making it to university. The figure at Ann Arbor is just over 5%. The university authorities recognize that the trouble now may reflect a failure to live up to the promises made 20 years ago.
Back in the 1960s and early 1970s, affirmative action, achieving higher black student enrollment, faculty representation, was among our highest priorities, and it was obvious, and the entire campus was united behind that. Some very, very ambitious objectives were set out and expectations were raised. It has been the case, I believe, on this campus and indeed at campuses across the country, that those priorities have slipped somewhat in recent years, and yet the expectations have remained very high.
The Detroit school system, from which the University of Michigan draws many of its students, has developed its own scheme to fight the fall in black college enrollment. It runs what's called a scholarship incentive program. Each year, a group of students are selected as they begin high school and guaranteed a university place and financial assistance in the future. Their progress through school is monitored by professors from the university, and the hope is that it will make a university education seem accessible in communities where most children see it as an impossible dream.
For other youngsters, there's a sense of hopelessness that, well, hey, I can't do this. And now someone has come and said, hey, we have tapped you. We are going to provide a mentor for you. We are going to promise you that if you do better or reach for the stars, that there is a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Racism has showed itself outside the campus too in recent months, most notably in the battle between white supremacists and civil rights marchers in the all-white county of Forsyth in Georgia.
White supremacy! That's right!
Black leaders in the academic world have been quick to connect what happened there with what's happening on the campuses.
There has been for some time now a national attitude which has pushed issues of race discrimination to the back of the agenda. And as a result, the problems have simply been allowed to fester. And with that festering, they've finally reached a point where they've broken out and are now manifesting themselves in the sort of unrest and disturbances that we see nationally.
It's a mark of the way things have changed in America that what's happened on campuses is being so widely discussed, solutions so eagerly sought. But the way an age-old problem has emerged again among the nation's youth has served as a reminder that the battles of 20 years ago are still being fought. Edward Sturton, ITN, Michigan.